Hello, my name is Mark Hammond Baker. Today is November the 13th, 2020. Today is, it's about 1:30 a.m. I do work the night shift, which is why I'm up so late. Please note that I'm a very passionate speaker, and so my loud voice and intense emotions should not be taken in a way that offends anyone. The nature of this video is to help humankind by talking about a very important issue. There is a big issue in the world, and I want to share my opinion on the matter with you all. The topic of this video is why we should place the term mental illness with brain disorder. Have a listen and I'll tell you why. We often define mental health as the absence of mental illness. During this time, mental illness is incorrectly defined as a psychopathology, which is otherwise known as a disease of the mind. What this means is that when doctors or people in general say that you have a mental illness because you were diagnosed with anxiety, depression, or schizophrenia, they are claiming that your mind has a disease. This is inaccurate because with modern science, we know that mental illness actually has nothing to do with the mind. They are biological problems, if you can even call it a problem, with the brain. So the phrase mentally ill is extremely outdated and goes back to over 100 years ago when patients were treated extremely inhumanely and doctors wanted to control them. They used the term mentally ill, but with scientific advancements, we now have more evidence that what we are calling mentally ill is actually a brain disorder, and we should call it a brain disorder. I say that mental illness is falsely defined because there is no such thing as a disease of the mind. This is because the term mental illness was invented as a means of psychological control. The doctors and the judicial system manage people with mental illness like we are living in a police state where individuals have no freedom or liberty, where we are all slaves to psychological conformity. And this is because we use the phrase mental illness inaccurately when what we should be saying is brain disorder. For example, in my adventure, I have noticed that other people are their own independent agents who are not bound by any predetermined logic and who can therefore make choices contingent on their independently operating free will. And this is true regardless of whether you have a difference in your brain or not. However, when a doctor says you have a mental illness, this is inaccurate because he is referring to your mind. And your mind is not what is diseased. It is the tissue of your brain, the neurons. I suggest that instead of using the outdated and violent word of mental illness, we replace the terminology with brain disorder. I say this because things like Down syndrome, autism, schizophrenia, bipolar depression, and depression are all biological problems. Mental is another word for mind, and the problem is not the mind. The problem is with the tissue of the brain, which is why we should call it a brain disorder. I have known plenty of people who have had brain disorders that could think just as well as anyone else. Would you judge someone for being short or for having brown hair? This simple comparison makes obvious how people are being treated inhumanely. We should not refer to people as mentally ill anymore. This war over control has gone on long enough, and the abuse perpetuated by society towards vulnerable people and their families must end. Yes, this is a war. Every day waking up in society who has labeled you as having a disease of the mind is a struggle to have the basic rights, liberties, freedoms, and resources as our counterparts. The struggle is all because the phrase mentally ill is being used instead of brain disorder. The argument is founded on the medical definition of illness. This argument is founded on the medical definition of an illness, which is defined as a pathological alteration of cells, tissues, and organs. Going forward from this medical definition, we determine that mental illness does not exist and is a myth because all diseases are due to biological problems. We should now call these problems brain disorders. For example, in Down syndrome, you have an alteration in chromosomes. This is not a mental illness, it's a genetic mutation, an illness defined in the medical sense. In schizophrenia, you have an increased number of dopamine receptors on neurons. And the causes of brain disorders such as bipolar mania and depression will one day be discovered, and this will put an end to the stigma and false logic brought about by the term mental illness. A disease of the mind does not exist, and the term mentally ill was invented by self-serving employees of the government called psychiatrists, who wanted to advance professionally and to offer a solution to people who are problematic in society. We label people who are socially deviant, social pests, who are odd, or who are challenging as mentally ill so that we can control them. Yes, the only reason we still use the term mentally ill is so that they can keep control. By labeling these people as someone with a mental illness, we perpetuate the idea that these individuals have voices that don't matter, that these people are not important, and that the decisions they make must be controlled by society. The idea of mental illness was invented as a means of social control. It is a social control mechanism. Any current illness, mental illness, will one day be shown not to be a mental illness or a disease of the mind, but rather a result of a pathological alteration of cells, tissues, and organs, which is why we should call it a brain disorder. Let me say this again. Labeling someone with a mental illness is a way to control them, to control their behavior, to control how they feel, to marginalize them, and in doing so claim that the person is incapable of deciding based on their own free will. Yes, doctors and the legal system assume that people who are mentally ill are incapable of making decisions that are merited by their own free will. They think of a brain disease like what we would be like to have Think of a brain disease like what it would be like to have a tumor in your head, something biologically wrong. I'm simply saying that the term mental illness is wrong to use. It is outdated and was invented as a way to control people. By replacing the phrase mental illness with brain disorder, we reduce the amount of stigma and violence that have been associated with people who have been psychologically raped by the mental health system. Labeling someone with a mental illness is a way to control their behavior. I say this because in doing so it is easier to take away their civil rights, to arrest their freedom, to reduce their liberty to a bare none, and to keep them defenseless, vulnerable, and locked up for no reason. Society wants to control every aspect of our lives, and they're using the phrase mentally ill to accomplish their self-serving needs. Allow me to restate my main argument. The medical definition of illness is a pathological alteration of cells, tissues, and organs. Therefore, the term mentally ill should be changed to the term brain disorder, because mentality refers to the mind, and the problem is not of our minds, it is the fabric of our brains. Moreover, mentality is often confused with ideology, and the philosophical ramifications that relate to trying to control someone's ideology are endless. The mind-body problem in philosophy has a huge relevance to this conversation. Doctors don't want you to know about this argument, though. The doctors, the judges, the police, and society want to be able to control us. I will say it again and again. The phrase mental illness is used as a way to control people who are socially deviant, social pests, who are odd, or who are challenging. They don't want people to embrace their individuality. The system doesn't want to hear people use their voice to make a world a better place. Instead, they are using a group of vulnerable people to make an example of anyone who doesn't conform to the dominant culture or their way of thinking. Regardless of what we call it, When our thoughts, feelings, or behaviors create a danger to ourselves or other people, we have the moral and societal obligation to try and protect that person or the people they may harm. When someone involves, which sometimes involves confining them in a psychiatric facility for treatment and protection. People who have brain disorders still need help, but we need to help them in a way that regards them as a human being and not someone that is considered less than that. Yet we must also establish a clear and distinct boundary between maintaining safety in the community and eradicating freedom and liberty. What length will we go to ensure that everyone is safe? Should we eradicate freedom and liberty of neurodiverse people in the name of safety, perpetuating conformity and enslaving the minds of the human race with false logic? Think about this. The term mentally ill is a phrase used to perpetuate false logic. This is just like something out of Brave New World, 1984, or Fahrenheit 451. Let me be clear, the phrase mentally ill is outdated and needs to be replaced with brain disorder. That's the end of my script. Thank you for watching. I hope I got my message through clearly, and I want you to know that this message was full of good intentions. I want to help people who are marginalized, who are vulnerable, and who are being abused by the system. Like and subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, and have a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Mark Hammond Baker. If there's anything I can ever do to help, please let me know. Send me an email, send me a text, send me a Facebook message, Twitter. I'm on everything. And if there's anything I can ever do to help you or anyone you know, just get in contact with me. Thanks. Have a great day.